Welcome to Author Chats, powered by EdCircuit and presented by John Catt Educational. John Catt Educational is proud to feature a roster of authors that includes education experts and practitioners in the UK and North America. In this interview series, published on EdCircuit, many of our authors will have the opportunity to discuss their latest publications and give you insights into the inspiration and strategies behind their books. Hello and welcome to EdCircuit Author Chats, presented by John Catt Educational. Today's guest is author, educator, and district leader Bolgen Vargas. Bolgen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me in.
A graduate of SUNY Brockport and GSE from University of Pennsylvania, Bolgen spent his career educating children from all walks of life. He served as superintendent of the Rochester, New York School District and the Manchester, New Hampshire School District. As an author, Bolgen's work explores creating opportunities for academic success from students from various backgrounds. Bolgen's recent book, Let Our Children Soar, The Complexity and Possibilities of Educating the English Language Student, was published by John Catt Educational this year. Bolgen, the book uses your own story as a framework for supporting students from many different backgrounds. How has your unique background supported your career as an educator?
Well, thank you for the question. My background have informed me and taught me that as an educator, I needed to be a resilient educator. What does that mean? That you have a profound belief that every student has the potential to be successful. And you as an educator also had that potential to help the students succeed. And you never doubt that. And you never give up on the students because his or her background or because she doesn't get an assignment the first, second, third time. In my case, it took me a very long time before I would get even how to pronounce a word in English accurately. And my teacher, thank God, they never gave up on me. They were resilient. They were dedicated despite the many challenges that they were facing. To give you an idea, when I came to this country, I didn't know more than 100 words for English when I entered Soar Park as a ninth grader. Now imagine for a moment any student coming into ninth grade where he doesn't know English. He never wears shoes to school in his own land. His mom didn't know how to write or read. His father didn't know how to write or read. And most of my siblings, most of them, particularly my brothers, the higher level of education was the sixth grade. So it will be even understandable if a teacher were to doubt the possibility of helping that student to graduate from high school in 4 years. That student was me. So I learned that resilience also doesn't mean just having hope and faith and caring and encouraging. All of that is part of resilience. But the most important part, in my view, as an educational leader, is to provide the support that I require for a teacher to succeed. Like, for example, giving them the time, the material, the text that they need, and sort of create the condition for the student to be successful and the teachers. And that is my firm belief. And when I became superintendent, one of the things that my theory of action, when I was on the ground, when I entered my office, my job is to support the teacher for them to do the job of teaching and learning.
Right. It takes the balance of both optimism and having the right resources and supports they need. That actually leads us to our next question. A focus of the book is how the U.S. education system can support English language learners. What are some challenges educators face when welcoming these students to a new learning community?
Despite the obvious, for example, the language varies, right, which I wish I didn't have, but that was a real challenge for the students and for the teacher. The other one is the cultural background for the students. And in any classroom, you could have a student from 10 different cultures or different background. Take, for example, my case. My prior educational experience is very limited. And that is not so obvious as the language challenger or the culture challenge, but it is a real challenge when a student comes into our school and he or she doesn't have the prior knowledge, even in the native language. Because in my case, I went to school only 2 hours a day. I didn't have a middle school. I completed 7th and 8th grade via radio. And one of the things that I provide the reader in my book is sort of like I take them in a journey with me for them to see and imagine what is it like to listen to an instruction via radio. And sometimes the sound is not the best because of multiple reasons. And then coming into the United States with that kind of prior background where the expectation and also most of my peers began their educational experience at much early age that I did. In my home, which again, my teacher didn't know that my mother didn't know how to read or never went to school. And how will they know? They also didn't know, in my case, that I had a full-time job. Not to buy a nice pair of sneakers, although I would have loved it, or buy a bicycle, I would have loved that. My priority was to help my family pay the rent. And also, I could not have been more proud when I sent part of my first check to my grandmother back in the island where she was experiencing an economic challenge.
Absolutely. Yeah. Understanding the context in which students come from is absolutely essential. Something you mentioned is the language barrier, and literacy is a foundational concept in the book. Outside of the simple fact of a language barrier, the inability to properly communicate in another language, how does literacy impact immigrant students' learning journey?
In a significant way, and impact all students, and it's a major challenge. It's the main task for our school system. It's not the only task, but it's a very important task to help our students to learn how to read, and also a love of learning and writing and numeracy. All of that is important for all students, but for the immigrant student, it has a different, an additional challenge, and that is not just the language, but also if you are proficient in your home language or in your native language, in my case, it's Spanish, you are most likely to experience success when you come to the United States. In the case of many students like me, I didn't have that strong background. For example, I never read a book, although I came here when I was in 9th grade. I didn't have a book at home. So it was much difficult for a teacher in the United States, for my teacher to get me to be a proficient level in English. And I could have benefited and done much better had I had a book at home, library in my community, which we didn't have. And one of the things that I will never forget is the teachers. When I went to school here, the first thing that they gave me the first day was a book for the class, a textbook. So I came home with about 7 books for my classes. And my mother was shocked because she said, "What are all those books?" So we went from no book at home, all of a sudden I have 7 or 8 with me and expected to read them. So literacy is extremely important, but it was a challenge for a student like me who never read a book to begin that journey. And one of the things that I do in the book is literacy is one of my favorite areas to speak about, because of the complexity, but also the beauty of it. I was so joyful when my teacher introduced me to the library. And when I saw the library, it was just incredible, although it was foreign to me. Mm-hmm. So now the teacher was doing a phenomenal job in exposing me to literacy. But nevertheless, it was a challenge for them, as it was for me, to begin that process. Because being functional leader, being able to read or write is one thing. Being able to read and write at the college level is another thing. And that's what my teacher did for me, that they prepared me in 4 years, I couldn't believe it, to go to college and succeeded by graduating from college in 4 years. So I totally believe in the power of leadership and the power of these teachers and the school to prepare our students.
Absolutely. Absolutely. More than just reading, it's confidence and the ability to see yourself succeed, which is awesome. Interested in sharing your voice with the K-20 and EdTech community? EdCircuit empowers thought leaders across education to share their voices with our audience. Visit edcircuit.com to learn more. So family engagement is essential to ensuring student success. What are some typical barriers to connecting with new members of the community? And how can school districts better engage families from diverse lingual and geographic backgrounds?
The typical one, which we spend a lot of time with talking about, is language and culture. And those are powerful challenges for the family and the school. Imagine how do you connect with my mother, who you will send a letter who couldn't read it, or love for her son. In my case, she wanted me to be successful, but she couldn't help me with the homework. So the challenge for immigrants' family like mine and many others is enormous, but nevertheless, they bring something with them, and that is their dream for their children to be successful. And if we were utilizing a mindset that is positive, that instead of viewing people like my mom and other with a deficit mindset, that we said, my God, this mom is working 2 jobs to provide for that kid. That's a contribution. In the case of my mom, the other thing that she had that was very positive was the appreciation and respect for the power and the beauty of a teacher to help her child become as successful as I did. She taught me how to respect the teacher, how to listen with them. If they give you an idea, I was not allowed, my mother was not allowed to put any book on the floor, even though she didn't know what was between the pages of the book. And I remember the teacher telling the kids when the book was given to us that we needed to respect it, to make sure that we are covered and don't dirty the books, don't break the pages. If I would have done that, my mother would have killed me. And nevertheless, have I not returned the book, and she would have got a note saying, your child haven't sent you return the book that we gave him in the beginning of the year, I would have been in big trouble. And my mother was helping the school in so many ways, but there's sometimes a misunderstanding between the value of people like my mother and other immigrants. There are cultural values. Like, for example, I was not expected in my home country to be as a participant in the classroom in the sense that of dialogue and engaging. You more or less, you listen to the teacher. And that was the most important quality, which is not about one. But in the United States, they also expect to respond and to look a teacher in their eyes. And for me, I didn't do that because you just obey and you are obedient. And I get it. The United States system has a beauty in it because they also try to raise the kid to be more independent and more self-sufficient. I'm not criticizing by any means for the cultural gap, the language gap, and the educational gap between the family and the school sometimes represent a difficult challenge. But they all could be addressed. That's the beauty of it.
And do you have some strategies for success in addressing those challenges?
Well, absolutely. One of them is getting to know my, in the book, I talk about how one of my teachers visited my mom. Now, I'm not naive. I was a superintendent. I know that if you have, at the high school level, it's almost impossible. Some of my teachers had 150 students. And it's even today, some high school teacher will have 125 kids. It's very difficult to do. And but it can be done. That you also could be innovative. By innovative, I mean collaborating with community organization, and that's the job of the superintendent and other administrators to facilitate that. So you cannot put all the onus on the teacher. You have to work as a school community to get to know the population of your school. And it's not easy, but I will say that that's where all begin. Understanding and appreciation for each other begin with us getting to know one another. I mean, it sounds like a simple thing, but one of the things that we don't do is to give teacher enough time or create the condition for teacher to be able to get to know the complexity that student like me, I bring into the school.
That time is an essential resource for those teachers to connect with their students and their families as well. That's really
absolutely. And if I could find one thing for teacher, that would be time for them to do that essential work.
And that actually leads us to our next question. If you had the power to immediately change the U.S. education system in any way, what would you implement to support immigrant students?
Well, the first thing, it should not be a surprise to you, given our conversation so far, it would be to change the teacher job. As a superintendent, when I had a conversation with business leader, and they had their own idea, which I welcome. I don't think that one should not expect for others to have ideas about our school. But one of the things that I used to tell them was that our teacher, during the day, many of the things that we asked them to do had nothing to do with teaching and learning. And some business leader, I recall giving a presentation, they were shocked. What do you mean that you hired these people and you asked them to do things that had nothing to do with teaching and learning? I said, well, imagine, for example, some of our teachers have what we call administrative duties. And that include study hall where the kids are not studying. That include hallway duties. That include spending a period making copies. And that include cafeteria duties. That includes so many things. In today's world, we even want them to be data analysts. So I will redesign the teacher job in a way that reflects the difficult task of teaching immigrant kids, but not just immigrant students, all students, because it's not an easy task. It doesn't matter where you come from. To educate a kid takes collaborative work among many players, from the home to the school, to the community, to the colleagues themselves. But one of the most difficult challenges that we are facing today is the shortage of teacher, not just for English language learners, but also for all kids, particularly in urban setting. And teachers are telling us, and they've been telling us for many years, that the working condition in our school are extremely harsh, and I have seen it firsthand. For example, as a school counselor, one of the things that I used to provide our teachers said, well, let me know if one day you need help with your class. And they would look at me like, what do you mean? Don't you have to do your job as a counselor? I said, but I like to get to know my kids in their own setting. And they were appreciative. And one thing that we know for many years, everybody could go to the bathroom when they want to. Guess what? An elementary teacher doesn't have that luxury to go to the bathroom when they want to. And we ought to be able to change that because we do know that most of our teachers, particularly today in our society where there's different opportunity for people, that they are choosing not to stay. The average teacher, unfortunately, at the time of this interview, they, after 5 years, are leaving the education system, and we need to resolve that issue. We need to resolve the issue of their working condition for the sake of our kids and the sake of the education system. Of course, there are many other things that we need to change, that if we had a couple of more hours, I would have loved to go over with you. But if you want to learn a little more about that, that's why I wrote the book.
Yeah, and to your point on time, if you're looking for teachers to have more time to dedicate to their students, look at their additional duties and look at their conditions. So that's really awesome. Thank you so much.
Well, for example, would it make sense for you to pay a teacher a salary? Let's say in my case, I was making about $60 an hour, so that my peers, some of the teachers, or many of them, and that's at that time when I was a counselor, was pretty good. Mm-hmm. But then you would ask them to stand on a line in front of a copy machine, to spend time waiting for the machine to be available and spend 1 hour, 45 minutes making copies or doing whole duties. And I'm not saying that all jobs are dignified, but you could find a better match for other folks or other people to do that job. And again, I want to repeat that the paraprofessional, the cafeteria person, or the person who is cleaning the floor of the school, those are very important functions, right. An important job, and we have to dignify work for all people. But at the same time, it doesn't make sense to continue to add more and more and more to the teacher job and to the teacher's responsibility.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Bolgen, for sharing your ideas with me and our listeners. As you can imagine, there's so much more to this. So please check out Bolgen's recent publication, Let Our Children Soar, The Complexity and Possibility of Educating the English Language Student, and find more information in the show notes.
On behalf of John Catt Educational, thank you for listening to this episode of Author Chats. To access other podcasts in this series, visit edcircuit.com for a complete lineup of engaging topics. EdCircuit empowers the voices of education with hundreds of trusted contributors, change makers, and industry-leading education innovators.